Shel from Paper Rock TO Studio, and I have another NaNoJouMo page to share with you today. This is November 22nd, and I'm starting out again in my homemade jelly print journal. And the theme that we picked, my friends and I, today is trees. And so I picked a page that had some leaves and some green colors and blue colors, and it has a tree, but it's upside down. So what I'm doing right now is I am blending the background together to make it a little bit more uniform using just plain white gesso and my 2-inch Speedball soft rubber brayer. I love this 2-inch size. I've had the 4-inch forever since way back when I first was stamping, but the 2-inch is the bomb. And they have a 1-inch. I mean, they have a lot of different ones. I had no idea till I looked. So if you want a smaller brayer to use in your art journals or to use on small jelly plates, this one's a great option. Now I've got some blue craft paint, and again, just all I'm doing is just like kind of grunging up the pages, making them more uniform. There's a lot of blue on the right side and not so much on the left, so I just wanted to make it more uniform because I'm going to be making a bit of a scene. And this is a map, and my friend from the Craft Shack, Heather, sent this to me. It's a Montana map, and I like to use maps for collaging. I think they're really awesome. They have a great looking graphic because of all the different lines and letters in them, and I just think they're super cool. So I'm going to be using this to make a ground in the front or a horizon line by doing some collage. And I've got some liquid matte medium that I'm going to be using to glue it down. You'll see me put some on my palette there in a second. There we go. It's a Liquitex product. I like this one because it's liquid. It's just basically liquid glue, and it's very matte. And when I'm putting craft paints and gessos on there, that's going to give a very matte finish. Those are not glossy paints at all. So my whole project is going to end up being pretty matte finish, which is actually my preference, unless I'm doing a very shimmery project, you know, with lots of glitz and glamoring sequins and stuff. Then I like a glossy medium, but all the rest of the time I prefer the matte mediums, and there's a lot to choose from, different thicknesses and different brands. So I've just torn some strips of the map, and I'm just placing them on there to make kind of like a hill, or I don't know, some texture to the terrain there. I don't want the map to be readable. I don't want everyone to say, oh, that's a map. I just want it to give the look of lines of the horizon. So that's what I'm doing. I'm using my old very grungy brush there to apply it. That poor brush has been beat down. Now I'm picking some heavy body paints. I started out with my Deco Arts, and then I changed my mind. Just different colors of green and a white, a titanium white there. And I put those on my palette. These are heavy body. They're Liquitex, except for I think that one might be Artist Loft. A couple of them might be Artist Loft from a set that I was given. But they're basically the same thing. And then I've got some stamps. This is the same pine tree stamp from Stampin' Up that I used the other day on my lumberjack page, if you guys watched that one. And I'm blending the colors on my palette with a sponge brush, just like mixing different colors together. I don't want it to be a solid color. I want them to be variegated, because if you look at a tree, it's not a solid color. I mean, yeah, it's green, and you say, oh, look, that tree is green. But in reality, it's green, it's dark green, it's light green, it's white, it's yellow, it's got all different types of colors. So that's the idea that I'm doing here. And for this first line across the back, I'm making them light, a light color. Because if you look out into the horizon, things that are further away are lighter, and things that are closer are darker. So that's the type of what I'm trying to get with this. And then I'm now stamping another line of trees that will be closer to your eye in a slightly darker paint. I'm using the same paints. It's just I'm dipping more in the dark color than I am in the lighter colors and the white. This stamp is wood mounted, so it's tricky to stamp in journals because, you know, you've got all the different pages and it's bumpy and lumpy. And so sometimes you'll see me either trying to restamp and press harder, or going in with my little brush and just filling in the spots. This is the idea of this is a big pine forest. It's going off into the distance in the hills, and so it's okay if it's not perfect. It's okay if it's, if I'm having to fill it in a little bit. Be sure if you're using acrylic paints with rubber stamps or silicone stamps or acrylic stamps that you clean them off right away. You get that paint all stuck in the grooves and it's really, really hard to get out. And by the time you're finished with that, you probably just toss it because you're like, oh, this is too much of a pain. So then you saw my heat tool briefly. It was not brief, but I cut out the drying. I mean, who wants to watch me dry paint? Come on, that's boring. And I'm just trimming off the extra edges of the map where they overlapped the page. I did a pretty poor job on that one side. It's pretty bumpy, but it's okay. Now this is a different stamp. This is from Lovely as a Tree Stampin' Up, which I believe is still available. That's a very popular Stampin' Up set that's been around a long time. And I'm going to be stamping it. It's a detail stamp. I'm going to be stamping it in the foreground. And I wanted to use brown, but my brown permanent pad was dry. So I went ahead and got the Archival Black by Ranger, and I'm stamping with that. Sometimes I really have to press down hard. There's something bumpy on that one side. I don't know what it is, but wouldn't let me stamp. And then I just kind of lightly, with like a second or third stamping, went over a few of the trees in the background to give them just a little tiny bit of detail on top. So that was my big plan. Now I've got some brown paint, and I'm just these detail stamps, the trunk on them is just 2 lines. It has an open space in between. So I'm going with a fine brush, a fine round brush, and applying just the brown paint onto the trunks, and even adding a few extra trunks that weren't there so that it appears as though you're looking into a forest of trees, because today's theme is trees. And then I was putting some brown on to the foreground there just to make it look more natural, and I put too much, and so then I wiped it with a baby wipe, and then I realized that I actually like that technique of putting on and wiping off, because you can pick up the texture of the different layers of the map a little bit darker with the paint after it's wiped off. So I just put it on with my finger, wiped it off. And now I've got an angled brush, and an angled brush, a flat angled brush, is actually my very, very favorite thing in the universe, because you can make fat lines, you can make thin lines, you can do detail. And in this case, I'm just like pouncing with it, just pounce. And because the pointed tip of the angled flat brush is facing away from me, that end of the pounce is finer. And so I'm just basically filling in the branches here with some green and some highlights on one side, as if the sun is shining in from the left, so that the trees look more realistic. And also it fills in some of the blank space between the solid trees and the detail trees. There was kind of a lot of blue right there in that line. So I filled it in a little bit with that brush. And there you go, big pine forest. Got to dry it some more. Okay, now I'm getting out my Deco Arts paints. These are the Deco Arts media line for mixed media. They are liquid acrylic paint, like the golden fluids. Very similar to that, and they are in the artist colors. So when you're picking an artist color paint or a higher quality paint, they come in the same colors, and they're weird things like quinacridone gold and dioxidine purple and all these weird things that you have a hard time saying. But ultimately, they are going to be the same or very similar shade no matter what brand you do. So you should be getting exactly the same shade as you would otherwise. If you're picking up a craft paint or a student grade paint, you might get a blend. Like it might be called something like Apple Red, which is actually a blend of maybe primary red and a little bit of cobalt blue or something. I don't know their exact formulas, but what I'm saying is that if you really want to go, if you want a specific color because you are specifically blending it with another color yourself for a custom blend, or if you just want to know exactly what you're getting, the artist grade paints are the way to go. Of course, they're more expensive, so if you don't want to spend a lot of money, that's fine too. But these Deco Arts ones are a good choice simply because they're a little bit less expensive than the Goldens, but seem to be, in my opinion, pretty much the same quality. Exactly. In fact, I can't tell a difference. So I like them. The color I'm using is iron oxide transparent, so it's not going to be a solid paint. You can see through it a bit, but it's kind of a rusty color because I guess if you oxidized iron, what would you get? You'd get rust. So why didn't they just call it rust? I don't know. They didn't. Maybe because of what's in it, what it's made out of, I'm assuming. It must actually be made out of rust. I don't know. So obviously, as you can see, I painted a tree. Because what are we doing today? Trees. I love trees. Trees are awesome. Now I've got some quinacridone gold, and I just wanted a different tone in the tree. This paint is a little bit more opaque, but I didn't really like it, so I blended it with a little spot of white that I had from my finger, actually. From earlier, I got some on my finger and I wiped it on the palette when I flipped the paint over. And then I thought, that looks nice. I like that color, so I got out some more titanium white out of the Deco Art bottle there and went and blended it some more. Then you'll see it's getting a little bit too white, so I go back in again with the iron oxide transparent again. But I want variegation on my trunk. Trunks aren't all solid color, nor do they feel solid when you touch them. So you're definitely going to get shadows and highlights on a trunk. And if you touch it, you might get a sliver. I don't know. And I'm using a small round brush, a very small round brush. It's not a liner because it's short, but it's about that size. Some people really like big brushes. I tend to go for small brushes for some reason. So you might be getting the idea of the theme of this page already. That tree is not a pine tree. It's in a pine forest, but it's not a pine tree. In fact, it's not any kind of tree you'd ever actually know. So I went back to my flat angled brush. I think it's a 6. And this is green gold. And what I'm doing is just pouncing again. And another thing that this kind of brush will do is make a leaf shape if you pounce with it. Because it's thin on one side and fatter on the other, it makes a perfect leaf shape. So I'm adding some leaves. And of course, this light green color is actually pretty accurate as to what you might see as a leaf. But after this, I go from normal to a little weird to weirder and weirder and weirder, because that's just how I roll. This one is primary yellow. Doing the same thing, just going around all the branches, adding leaves, and there it goes. I'm speeded up. I've become super painter. I'm just painting so fast. Got to get my cape. I'm going to have to sew one. Or someone else who sews really well should sew me one. That would be great. And this one is... Gosh, I can't remember the name of the orange right now. I should have got those all out and put them in front of me before I started talking, like I knew what I was talking about. That one's a primary red, and I know I have primary magenta next after that. And then I believe I do cobalt blue and then dioxidine purple. But it's all the same process. Dip, dip, dip. Smush, smush, smush. Splat, splat, splat. And there you go. Leaves in all kinds of colors. That one's the primary magenta, but it doesn't look very magenta on this video that I'm watching. Hopefully it looks better on YouTube. Looks kind of rust colored. Not that dissimilar to the one that's already on the palette. But believe me, it's a different color. Oh, and that's the purple, so I must have done the blue after. I don't know. That's definitely the purple though. That's a really dark purple. I need to get a lighter shade of purple. I have to figure out which one it is. And there's the cobalt blue, which originally must have actually had cobalt in it. Okay, my tree is done. It looks nothing like the pine trees. And right now I'm looking for my stamps. There they are. This is a Stampin' Up! Alphabet stamp set. Don't think it's available anymore. But it's really cool. It's hard to see on the video, but the solid part of the stamp is very scratchy. Like, it's not completely solid. Am I making sense? I don't know. It's not solid. It's a scratchy looking thing. But it's really these are cool. Very cool. I like them. So I'm using this to stamp my sentiment for today. I'm using a metal ruler there, and I start, in order to try to make everything fit on the page the way I want, I start with the top line and then I go to the bottom line and stamp that in, and then I do the middle, because guaranteed if I tried to do the middle first, then there would either be a bigger gap between the top and the middle or a bigger gap between the bottom and the middle, but either way there would be an unsightly gap. I can guarantee it. Also, that happened. My word almost went off the page. But a nice thing about this stamp set is that you can make it a little higher, a little lower, and fit in with the other letters and make them closer. So I like it. I like that one. That's why I kept it. And now I have my white fine tip Posca paint pen, and I'm doing like a shading on just the downstrokes basically, which is kind of what you do when you're trying to make something appear three-dimensional. But I changed that, but that's what I'm doing right now. Now for the splatters. Can't have a page if there's not splatters. I think it might be a rule. I'm not sure. That was my fan brush and watered down white acrylic paint. And then I decide to change the letters by going around the edges all the way on every single line with my white Posca to make them stand out more. I think that makes the difference. I like it a lot better. Maybe because the black wasn't black enough. I don't know. But I think you can read it better when it's like this. So now that my date is stamped, we're going to go into the regular pictures, and you will notice that the tree and the leaves magically got some detailing, which I think looks a lot better. I did that with the camera off. I thought the camera was on, but it wasn't. And that's what happens sometimes. So you can see what I did. And I think that's about it. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.